Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. I forgot to update the Twitter. I am your host, as always, Chad Porto. Joining me is the glorious one himself, Marcus Green. Marcus, how are
Yes. We're coming to you on a Wednesday because we do what we want here.
you? I mean, it is nice not to have a boss and basically do our own thing whenever we want. But it's also not great because I'm highly unreliable at times.
This is something that doesn't necessarily affect our friendship in any way because I tend to be highly flexible.
Mm-hmm. We're very simpatico. Like one of us is the barnacle, one of us is the whale. I make sure you don't get eaten, and you make sure that I'm clean. Like it works. So on this week's show, we're talking CM Punk drama. That's obviously the start of the show. And frankly, I think I'm at the point where I want to say I told you so to people. Like, how did everyone not see this coming? Not as a slight against Phil, the Philster, Mr. El Punkorama, but all of this stems from the nonsense that comes when you have employees making decisions that affect other employees. You cannot, shall not, will not have a successful company when you have the same people making decisions that affect their colleagues. Because even though people like the Guns, not the Guns, sorry, wrong promotion. People like the Bucks, there we go, and Kenny Omega are peers to guys like CM Punk and your Jamie Hayters and your Action Andretti's. They're also the bosses, and they get paid just like everyone else off of a variety of factors, namely merch. You get the most screen time, you get the most merch sales. That's kind of just how it goes. So it's not surprising that there's a conflict of interest when you have schmucks running a company that they're basically building around themselves. Now, they're not the worst people to build around. At least they weren't 4 or 5 years ago when they were younger and healthier and not so overplayed. But in recent times, we've seen just how bad things can get when you allow those at top to not just have say in things, like the Click in WWE and the NWO in WCW, but what ends up happening when you have an entire company is that things get really ugly, especially when you have somebody coming in and taking the spotlight off of people. So it's really not surprising that when you get kosher buddy buddy with the head honcho that is Tony Khan, there's going to be some favorites there. There's going to be people who think they have more say than they should, and you end up getting a lot of nonsense that spins off of this, and this takes us to the first story of the night, the CM Punk drama. So the basic gist was that Punk wasn't healthy for his match with Mox, and Mox refused to lose to him. And Mox pitched this Rocky 3 idea, which would be Moxley steamrolling Punk, and then Punk getting the win back later. And Punk thought it was a dumb idea. And we saw it happen live. You know, like that's how it did play out, if I remember correctly. That Punk lost the title. Or was it the title that he lost? Or was it just a match he lost to Moxley on Dynamite?
I want to say it was just a match, but because who did he drop the belt to? Or did he have to?
I think he vacated it twice.
Yeah, vacated it. Yeah, so he probably just he probably just lost the match to Mox.
So he and I think it was like the week or like 2 weeks before the pay per view, which was the mind numbing thing, and it was one of the rare times I remember watching Dynamite live, and I remember thinking to myself, "What are they doing? This is stupid." These two have never faced one on one that I'm aware of, at least on a major Fed. They because like right when the Shield were starting to get over in WWE, Punk left. It's like, I don't think they ever had a one-on-one. It's like, this was a big deal. And they just screw the pooch. And Mox apparently didn't want to do the JOB. I don't know why they booked the match at all, but here we are. So, according to WrestleZone, Punk revealed that the Moxley pitched the idea of his quick loss ahead of their bout at All Out 2022. Sean Ross of SAP of Fightful Select reports that per sources familiar with the situation, Punk made it clear he wasn't comfortable competing unless he was cleared ahead of the match on August 24th. There were reportedly issues within the creative in the build to the match, but AEW made special travel arrangements for Punk the day of the bout. The report notes that Punk at least suggested the idea of an additional reimbursement because he was competing without being cleared, according to his claims. SAP cited sources who indicated that Moxley and Punk have appeared to have heat since. As previously reported, Moxley, Jericho, and Bryan Danielson held a locker room meeting following All Out, and Punk called Jericho a liar and a stooge in his recent Instagram post. Jericho and Punk reportedly shouted at each other after the fight, and Jericho is said to have called Punk a disease. Punk did not say anything about Danielson in his post. Of course not, because Danielson's pretty freaking amazing. Additionally, sources expressed that they believe AEW would likely pick Moxley over Punk if it came down to it, and while the heat on Punk has lessened since All Out, plenty is still there. SAP went on to report that AEW and Punk have had some contact, and with some sources close to Punk noting that he and Tony Khan had spoken in some capacity. SAP wrote that the meeting was planned for mid-February, but that was reportedly delayed due to Jerry Jarrett's funeral. Punk reportedly wanted out of his contract without a non-compete clause, according to sources, but those same sources believed in recent weeks that Punk was open returning to AEW. Per SAP, at least one person stated that Punk was willing to apologize for his actions at the scrum, but it's unclear what context this apology would occur in. Multiple sources said that Punk had expressed some regret for the portion of the situation. However, AEW sources indicated that they lost confidence regarding Punk's return to the company following his Instagram post. As of the writing, Punk remains under contract with AEW. SAP cited sources who expressed that Punk was hopeful he could be healthy by late January. Those sources believe that he had to be cleared now or in the near future. So, this has split the AEW fandom down the middle, which thankfully we aren't a part of because, Jesus Christ, talk about toxicity. Punk is a little wrong. You know, like we talked about this before. I think the whole post-match press conference thing was ill-advised, but I don't think he was wrong about anything. But there's a time and a place to do these things, right? Doing it in a public setting like that with everyone kind of, off-kiltered, not the place to do it. That being said, your executive vice presidents should not be beating down the door of a talent's locker room looking for a fight. The fact that those three scumbags have a job still in management is peak clown nose buffoonery. I don't care how good Kenny Omega and the Bucks are in the ring. Well, the Bucks are boring as shit in my opinion. They are same note, different day. They are, I wanna sex you up. You got one hit, kid. That's it. And Omega is a shell of what he used to be in New Japan. Hell, he's a shell of what he was doing in Impact. His stuff in New Japan hasn't held a candle to his stuff in Impact. I'm sorry, his stuff in AEW hasn't held a candle to his stuff in Impact. So it's like, why is everyone kowtowing to Omega? He's slowed down, and he's almost 40. He destroyed his body in Japan. This was going to happen. I don't know why anyone's shocked about this. So seeing AEW bow to these three men is sad. They should have been removed as EVPs after All Out. They should have zero say in creative going forward. But Tony Khan wants to keep people very happy, apparently, and I don't know why. There are additions by subtractions, and even though these guys have name value, I don't think keeping them is a boon for this company. I don't know if keeping Punk is the right idea either, but you have so much talent that you're not using. I feel like if you lose the Bucks, you can actually move guys up into the tag team scene that actually have charisma. have personality and aren't just guys pretending to be cool by cosplaying Street Fighter. Like, aren't we done with that? Haven't we done that to death? Like, oh, I'm cool. I'm gonna cosplay as something cooler than me. No originality, and that's kind of the issue with AEW. Like, the originality is bunkus. They got guys like Action Andretti, Swerve, Darby Allin. They got Danhausen, although he can't stay healthy, and that's disappointing.
Jungle Jack.
Jungle Jack. You got Luchasaurus. You got so many great young talents that could be their own thing that they're being forced to work under Jericho. And let's be clear about something. I know I can be a Sting mark. And I say ludicrous things like, at 63 years old, I would put the world title on Sting. That's not a joke. That's why I shouldn't be a promoter. I'm a dumbass. But if anyone's going to sit here and tell me Jericho's as good as he ever was, bitch, he hasn't been as good as he ever was for 15 years. Like, going back to 2008, when he was doing his slow, methodical promo, that was the last time Jericho was A tier in the ring. Not even S tier. A tier in the ring. This dude is slow. He's so wrecked physically that he has to do a spinning back elbow that is only slightly faster than a drunken Scott Hall discus punch. So why, beyond the name value that Jericho provides, is he in so many high-profile feuds and matches is beyond me. His stable is of a bunch of mediocre-looking dudes that all kind of look alike, that all have the same kind of name, that stand out to the same degree as Jack Swagger in a room full of maggots. This is not an impressive stable, and like everyone memed Jericho to high hell because of some of the dumb shit he did, like a little bit of the bubbly. And now people are just trying to keep that memeability alive. He's not good anymore. Like, he's fine. If you were to say, I want to build a 6-man tag match or 6-man tag feud with Jericho and 3.0, and we're gonna run Jericho in 6-man tags for the next year, that's the way to go with Jericho. You know, once a guy starts to hit a limit physically, you find new ways to use them. That's why I'm kind of miffed that Sting and Darby Allin aren't being used in the 6-man tag scenario, because that's how you get not only the 6-man tag titles over, but how you get Sting over. You put him in a 6-man tag situation where you can take some of the significant pressures off of him, you raise the stakes of another title, and you highlight a major asset. You don't need to keep putting Jericho out there in singles matches, but that, again, comes back to his, I'm sure, incredibly massive pull backstage. So all this is going on simply because egos are not being kept in check. And CM Punk has made an entire career of calling out people who pissed him off. And it worked in his favor for 20 years. But now all of a sudden when it's the Bucks and Omega, now there's an issue. Now there's complaints. And I laugh every time, Marcus, when somebody goes, well, you know, Eddie Kingston doesn't like Punk, so clearly something wrong's with Punk. Eddie Kingston doesn't like Bryan Danielson or Cesaro either. Like, not exactly a point of reference for your argument. And everyone else who has an issue with Punk has an issue with him via one specific source, Tony Khan. Adam Hangman Page, the Bucks, Omega, Moxley, all of them are BFFs with Khan. All of them. And I know, like, a lot of people seem to think, like, Moxley's, like, a devout professional, a real locker room leader kind of guy. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's not. But when you start talking about favorites and feelings and personal admirations, people don't really wake up to what is and isn't a good thing in that scenario. And I don't think Moxley is a guy who is the right kind of leader, because if he was, he wouldn't be going on his wife's podcast to stoke the flames of an already overly dramatic situation. That's not something leaders do. They don't make things worse. So when you see guys like Jericho and Moxley acting like children, I sit here and go, well, it's not like Punk was wrong. Marcus, I turn to you and I ask, with all this AEW drama going on, has it affected your opinion on some of these guys, and has it affected your opinion on the promotion as a whole?
I mean, it's kind of just kind of confirmed. The only thing, look, Punk's, you can't really do and be who Punk is, become, and obviously the most popular parts of his career, and obviously probably I guess a lot of his career was specifically during his zenith, if you will, without having an ego. And obviously the Bucks, have their ego and whatnot. Just got people have egos in general, specifically, obviously men, and then very much machismo environment, what have you, and everybody feels like their spot has been rightfully earned, and everybody's put their paid their dues and whatnot, and a lot of everybody think their intentions are, that they got pure intentions and that they know what's best for things at this stage in their career, at this age and whatnot. So, unless everybody's narrative or you know wires are kind of going in the same direction, lines are going to get crossed, and unless you do have somebody that's like you use the word leader to kind of keep things on the up and up consistently and not get caught in the crossfire the way Khan ended up doing at that scrum. Things are going to collapse the way that they did with that backstage brawl. um to me, the surprising thing is the whole Moxley thing because he's always been somebody to me that's kind of stayed out of the way. He's not a social media guy. The only ways he likes to make it, well, that is appeared that he's like to make is in the ring. Don't really willfully try to do a lot of interviews because things just is what it is, and he'll deal with it when it comes. And um, if he don't need to, he kind of just let it go. But I think. Because I think the truest form of him that we've seen has kind of been the freedom that he's gotten in AEW. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's because I didn't even know about him going on his wife's podcast. That's why, it was surprising when you had brought it up. But, everybody got boiling points. And I think the weird thing is this situation on all sides has gotten all these guys to their boiling points, even though for some of them it takes a lot. So I think that kind of speaks to the consistency of volume of BS that this situation has caused, no matter if it started all at once or kind of built over time. So, it's that weird thing. I think even with all the names that you mentioned, the Moxleys, Punk, obviously the Bucks, Omega, and whoever else has been involved, Jericho, it all comes back to Khan. And the point you made about Moxley not making things worse. The first thing I thought about when you said that was Khan and his inability to kind of just walk away from things, specifically when he needs to vent, specifically when it comes to him venting on social media. He's not helped. And the way that he kind of looked like it looked at that scrum like he was the employer and Punk was the guy running the company.
You could say that Punk was his daddy, and he was telling everyone what his daddy does. Who is your daddy, and what does he do?
I'm your father because I am the logical. But yeah, it's just people say what they want, and I know, like you said, the toxic AEW of it all. They can say what they want about WWE. That would have never happened there. That situation. Now we've heard about situations, obviously walkouts, brawls, stuff of that nature. Obviously, we saw the video of Brock chunking the doggone belt at Vince, but again, it's Brock, so um, courtesy, much like a card, subject to change. But yeah, that would have never happened with Triple H or Vince sitting at a scrum.
No, and there's a reason why you don't see them do scrums. And I think this is part of the reason why.
And they it feels like they've done them more in recent time. And I don't want to necessarily pin that on the competition with AEW, but I think they've seen more, I guess, need for in terms of like just media disparity, in terms of the coverage of stuff, getting some of these superstars out there to kind of immediately address things. Kind of it cuts through a lot of the noise. Whereas with AEW, kind of because everybody kind of feels like they have this. It kind of almost feels like the West in a lot of ways. Everybody feels like Everything's kind of, 10 paces, turn around and shoot type of deal. A lot of stuff just goes left. Like when you said about the Bucks, like the reason why they felt like they could do what they did backstage is because in their mind they might as well be Khan themselves. That wouldn't have happened. Not like I said, we've heard stuff happen in WWE to the point people get boiled over in backstage scuffles and whatnot. But like you said, going in there banging on somebody's door type of situation, that kind of feels like is like I said, reached the point of no return. Like, you know, it was almost justifiable with that. Not even almost. It was justifiable what happened with Brett and Sean and all that time. Like when he went back there and I think he punched Vince on his ass or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't really blame him for that. He literally got screwed in the worst possible way. But with that, there's a level you would assume because I know you always been high on this professional decorum when it comes to stuff like that. Like that couldn't wait. Like you went in there, balls in the room. There was a dog involved. I think somebody else was involved. One of Punk's good friends. Chairs got thrown. That whole situation could have just been handled a lot better. Like I said, no matter how many names we bring up in terms of talent, it all comes back to Khan, and he's kind of allowed this, you know, devil may care attitude with guys because everybody's kind of on his good friend list and this, that, and the third, and it's not as much of a employee relationship as it should be until shit hits the fan. It's been a lot of dookie in the wind. So
I do agree with you with the idea that a lot of this falls on Khan and his inability to actually manage his fucking roster. And Moxley goes on to actually talk a bit about the drama that is AEW, and he says, "I will say this, and I hate to say, I don't think I've ever said anything remotely negative about AEW, but I will say this is as an observer. I spent 8 years on the Indies, a couple of years in WWE developmental, spent like 8 years in WWE. I have never seen so much bullshit drama in one place in my entire fucking life. I hate to say that, but it's like I don't know if it's because of the age of social media, shit gets like blown out of proportion. Like one person types one stupid fucking drunk tweet, and all of a sudden that's all anybody wants to talk about. We're sitting here doing a podcast. You know what we're not talking about? We're not talking about the fucking stellar match Vikingo and Kenny Omega just had. All the cool stuff going on in AEW. Cool shows are happening. We're not talking about this great pay-per-view we just had. We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about some bullshit. Just let me be clear. The vast majority of people that this there don't cause any fucking trouble. But they're getting sucked into the shit like everybody else, into the muck. There are plenty of people who just want to get better and perform and fucking do this job. It's the best job in the world. So I don't disagree with what Moxley's saying, but also Moxley's feeding the beast. So it's
yeah,
kind of, counterproductive.
yeah. I mean, it's weird. I'm glad you did that quote because that kind of puts my also that adds more context. Like almost gonna like you said, um, he's almost not spoken anything negative about the company, and he doesn't even really. And I guess, look, if you're gonna go someplace, safest place he could go is his wife's podcast, um,
Mm-hmm.
which is just smart. But because, like I said, he don't even really do a lot of interviews. He has no social media. He's not that guy. So for him to be coming out and saying like that, and like you said, it's only adding fuel to the fire. But I guess from Moxley's standpoint, he's sitting up there like, the like what you call has been on fire for a while now. That y'all just seeing the flames. We've been seeing this, you know, situation for a while, and it's to the point where even he can't. He probably feels like an adult in a room full of like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Kindergarten movie,
Yeah.
and that's sad. And one of the loudest kids, it may very well be his boss, and he's probably not going to say that obviously because the man's not dumb. But in a lot, look, man, snake rots from the head. You know, as the leader of the organization, I get it. He wants to be, have an intimate relationship with these guys. He wants them to be able to come to him. He wants the relationship to be simpatico. Obviously, I'm sure he's heard a million and two horror stories from the other place. But there's a happy medium that I think he kind of needs to find because that type of mentality is dictated by the pace that he sets. And if there's a level of respect that needs to be elevated for these guys to kind of act like adults. Something needs to change, and I think it sucks as much flack as we give him that it feels like a lot of times we've done these stories, and it's felt like Jericho has had to take that position for Khan. And maybe to an extent that's as the wily veteran that he is at this point, because he is absolute veteran. That's kind of to be expected with the just the narrative that goes along with the wrestling business. But I think it kind of comes off like he's kind of had to overstep even some of his duties because Khan just can't get these kids under control, and that sucks. But like you said, you can't put the inmates in charge of the asylum and get mad when everything's getting toilet papered or whatever. So
Feels like that episode of South Park where Cartman's teaching the kids. He's dressed as Edder James Olmos from I think what is it, Stand and Deliver. I just feel like somebody needs to grab the roster by the head and go, how do I reach these kids? Because they're children. They're children. And that's the thing that I think people get mad about. Was Punk was right. He worked with a bunch of children.
it's wait, no, Chad, not children. Come on, say it.
I don't know. Kids?
No,
Fucking,
you're
fucking
there.
children?
You're there. Come on. What is it? Come on, Shredder. What are they?
They're babies. Dumb babies. They're not dumb. Whack. Okay, they're dumb.
You're like, look at their leader's Twitter. What are you talking? Oh my God.
All right, they are dumb. Speaking of dumb, Bobby Lashley doesn't have a match for WrestleMania, and I'm perplexed.
Oh no, he's booked now.
Oh, is he?
Yes, and your favorite match, Chad, the legendary, the always classic, damn near match of the year on our site, almost every year. I'm talking to Andre the Giant Battlemore. Can't even finish the damn sentence.
When was this announced?
On Raw, when he was standing behind Boogs.
So I just pulled this up today. I don't know when it originally came out, I guess. Because it was an interview with Dennis Salito. Let me see. Hopefully it doesn't auto-start because I don't want to fucking hear this. So in a recent interview at a WWE Community WrestleMania thing, Bobby Lashley has gone on to say, I have no idea at all. All I know is that I think I have to provoke fear in a lot of people. You can go out there with me and you can have a match. We have a great match, but at the end of the day, the Almighty always comes through. I'm just looking for whoever wants to step up. And right now, I think a lot of guys in this business try to look at, oh, this is going to be a fun match for me. I want to be with this guy. I want to be with that guy. But if you want a real challenge, I'm a real challenge for anybody on the roster. So I guess they're still angling for him to have a singles match on top of things. I didn't know they were doing the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. I don't think they should do the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Let's see. I got the WrestleMania card up here somewhere. Big time in a way out larger than life. I'm not seeing the Memorial Battle Royal on the WrestleMania card. Oh, they're doing it. Marcus, they're doing that Friday on SmackDown.
Well, you had a good run, kid. He was like, we're gonna run the play. All right, this is our best chance to win.
Coach, we're down 50-0 with 3 seconds left.
Like,
who do you want to see Bobby tangle with?
honestly, well, I'm saying honestly, like that's not what we do here.
We only do honesty.
Yeah, because it's been going back and forth, and it's been a good back and forth, but you kind of need some freshness. And I like the whole thing about him really wanting to be the U.S. champion, the good U.S. champion. We've seen him with it twice now, obviously. Um, that kid has other narratives going on with John Cena. He's gonna have more than his hands full. A Town Down or whatever his name is. I'd like to see Lashley versus Gunther.
That would be impressive.
Yeah, that would be, and it actually would have been cool if they could have did a. And I know this is usually something they do for Survivor Series. But it could have been like if they could have kept him as U.S. champion and just had a thing, because you don't need a title for to call out somebody. Like if you're gonna make Cena the guy that they call out now instead of hustling poor Undertaker out there every year, um, that match didn't require a title. But at this point, for Theory, that title has more to do with his ego than it does the actual feud. So, but Lashley could have been. That could have been a hell of a match. Champion versus champion, IC versus US, Gunther, and then Lashley. That could have been a show stealer match. But obviously Lashley's got thrown this damn battle royal, and Gunther's gonna have his hands full with both Sheamus and McIntyre. So yeah.
I wonder how that's going to play out and if it's going to be any good. I know a lot of people are excited for it. I'm not. But I feel like this would have been a great year for Gunther to have like that Lashley match, that Lesnar match. But instead they're giving him, 36-year-old Drew and 42-year-old Sheamus. 37-year-old Drew and 45-year-old Sheamus. This is again, like this is the same conversation we're having with Jericho. At a certain point, guys need to be shuffled off into the 6-man tag team scene. I feel like that's Sheamus. Drew, sadly, will always go down as the modern day Kevin Nash in the sense that he's one of the lowest drawing champions of all time because there was no audience. And his feuds never really materialized in a big way. In fact, WWE treated him just like Impact did. Anytime Drew went up against someone bigger and more imposing, he lost. Specifically, and ironically, most of those times were to Bobby Lashley. I don't think Drew's ever gotten a win over Bobby. And I feel like sticking Gunther in this match with Sheamus and Drew McIntyre is a letdown considering what you could have done. But you and I see things far differently than the WWE does, so here we are. Speaking of seeing things differently, Marcus, let's talk about the Hall of Fame. There's only 5 Hall of Fame inductees this year, and honestly, only one really deserves to go in. So Rey Mysterio's going in.
Mm-hmm.
All the sense in the world. Greatest American luchador of all time.
Mm-hmm.
The Great Muta's going in. If we're talking about a New Japan or a Universal Wrestling Hall of Fame that incorporates all promotions, yes, absolutely deserves to go in. Has he done anything with the WWE? Never. Dick all. But he's going into the WWE Hall of Fame, even though he's never done anything with the WWE. Granted, he did do things with WCW, but that's still not the WWE. Stacy Keibler's going in. And when you read her accolades, it was Nitro Girl Search winner, 1999. Fun fact, she was known as Sky at the time, and she was a 19-year-old who was a Baltimore Ravens cheerleader. I have the WCW magazine that has her debut. And she looked very good in that outfit, so I remember it vividly. She was the 2004 Babe of the Year. And then she was a manager and valet for numerous wrestlers in WCW and WWE. Never any great talents, mind you. You know, she managed the Dudleys. She managed Test and Scott Steiner. Can you think of anything else she did in WWE besides exist? Because that's all I got. And I like Stacy Keibler. She's a name. But is she a Hall of Fame talent? No. She's never been a great promo. Wasn't a great wrestler. She was just pretty. Then we have Andy Kaufman. He shouldn't be going into the WWE Hall of Fame at all either. Like, yeah, he had a great moment with with Jerry Lawler in the late 70s, early 80s. But it wasn't for the WWE. It wasn't for any federation that they own that I'm aware of. And then lastly, you have Tim White going in posthumously for the Warrior Foundation. And yeah, that's fine. I think that one has some merit to it because he was a longtime referee and producer, and he was also the assistant for Andre the Giant, apparently. This might be the weakest class I've seen in a long time, if not ever.
Which you hate to affiliate with Rey Mysterio because of just who he is, who he's been. Um, he's still going to be in the greater ethos of the business because obviously we have his son, and even that's going to be. I wonder if that's going to even play into. I would imagine they kind of cut the crap because that is a big deal for Ray. And he probably did kind of hold off retiring to do this whole thing with his son. Uh, but I wonder if they're gonna allow that to play into it because the whole point of the son being such a douchebag to the point where he's now uttering our sentiments all those years back. It's like, I wish Eddie was my father, Holmes, and that whole deal. Um, yeah, I wonder if they're gonna do something with that. I would imagine not because just Mysterio is one of the most respected guys in the company and the business was, so. But we'll see. But like you said, it does come off weak. Like I said, it's coming off like an afterthought, which usually they put a lot of stock into it. They usually try to do like what a big three and then kind of fill out the rest of the spots in the past.
So the last few years, it seems to be three, and then a celebrity, and then the Warrior Award. That was the case last year. They had Taker, Vader, and Charmel, which
Yeah.
I
And then
love
they
Charmel.
yeah.
She's not a Hall of Famer. Her claim to fame is being Booker T's wife. Although I would say she's more deserving than Stacy Keibler because at least she was charismatic. Then you had the Steiners,
Yeah.
and then you had Shad,
That was a good one. Yeah.
right? And then 2020 and 2021 were together. So 2020s was JBL, the British Bulldog, and Juice and Thunder Liger. At least Liger appeared in NXT at one point. JBL, I guess that's fair, and then British Bulldog is obviously a good one to go with. The NWO was inducted, which included Hollywood Hogan, Nash, Hall, and Waltman, and then the Bella Twins. So that's something. And then William Shatner went into the celebrity wing, and then Titus O'Neil was the Warrior Award. And then you also had Ray Stevens, Brickhouse Brown, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Baron Michael Leone, and Gary Hart for 2020. 2021 had Molly Holly, Eric Bischoff, Kane, the Great Khali. Fucking Christ, really? Rob Van Dam, Ozzy Osbourne went in as a celebrity wing. Rich Herring was the Warrior Award inductee. And then you had Dick the Bruiser, Pistol Pez, Wheatley, Buzz Sawyer, Ethel Johnson, and Paul Bosch. So more ample, significantly more ample. You're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 alone for 2020. And then for 2021, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So even in 2020 and 2021, they had more robust Hall of Fames. Granted, they had more due to the legacy wing, but I don't see that as a problem.
Yeah. It's ironically enough, you ran out them there. I'm like they could have actually killed two birds with one stone. Well, two considering who they are, but they could have had the Bellas go in as performers and a celebrity.
Yeah.
Uh,
2019 had a pretty weak class. Honky Tonk Man, Tori Wilson, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, DX, Harlem Heat was nice. Heart Foundation was nice. Sue Atchison for the Warrior Award, and then you had Bruiser Brody, Wahoo McDaniels, Luna Vachon, S.D. Jones, Professor Tauru Tanaka, Primo Camara, Joseph Cohen. Okay, here we go. Hishimami. Yeah, hang on, I can do this. Hisashi Shinma, Buddy Rose, and Jim Barnett. So like, it's only been the last 2 years where the Hall of Fame has been significantly reduced, which shouldn't be surprising because, as we see with WrestleMania, not the strongest of cards. So here's what we know for sure: night one, and then everything else will be on night two. You have Austin Theory versus John Cena. You and I both agree Austin Theory is bland. We're not entirely sure he's not Grayson Waller. We have our doubts, but we're not sure. You have Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul. I refuse to say the other name that Seth has. Then you have a 6-woman tag with Trish, Lita, and Becky Lynch versus Damage Control, Cyril. I need vowels. Like, vowels work. Which includes Bayley, Dakota Kai, and Io Shirai. Io Sky. Then you have Brock Lesnar versus Omos. Fucking Christ. Bianca Belair versus Asuka. Oshkosh Bagosh. And then you have Charlotte Flair taking on Rhea Ripley in what I think is supposed to be the main event. Night two's main event is going to be Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns. And then the matches that have been announced but have not been given to a card yet includes Gunther versus Sheamus and Drew McIntyre for the IC title. Edge versus the Demon Finn Balor at Hell in a Cell. Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez versus Natalya and Shotzi versus Ronda and Shayna Baszler versus Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville. And for the women's WrestleMania Showcase Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match. And then at the men's WrestleMania Showcase Fatal 4-Way match, we have Braun Strowman and Ricochet versus the Street Profits versus the Alpha Academy versus the Viking Raiders. Yay, that'll be great. We also have the undisputed tag team titles with the Usos taking on Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. And then a match that I think might actually really be good, or the worst thing since sliced bread, Rey Mysterio versus Dominic Mysterio in a Mysterio on a Mysterio match. I would say the build to this has been C-ish, C+ish. I wouldn't say that any of these matches really have me hyped, but they're here. Marcus, you watch the product far more regularly than I do. What do you think? How do you think this card is being built?
Yeah, I think it hit me differently as you were rattling off the names. I'm like, they didn't split the. I'm surprised they got both of the singles women's title matches on one night, back to back no less. So that's gonna be interesting seeing how that goes. I'm pulling for both to be good, but I feel like Bianca and Asuka's gonna have a better match. Having a slight edge of the fact that we've never seen them before, so that's an advantage. But yeah, the Bills kind of been, and specifically to the match that you was talking about with the Mysterios, because that match is also going to be weird because one, like obviously it's father versus son, that's unique, but okay. But then also like Dominic's Arsenal is basically his father's moves.
It's going to be like one of those Street Fighter games where you're playing as Ken and Ryu. Got the same move set. Could be fun. Probably won't be. Like, that's the thing. I don't think we've ever seen. Well, no, we have, because I remember vividly David Flair and Ric Flair having confrontations in WCW. And Hulk and Horace Hogan are uncle and nephew, so I don't know if that counts. Plus Eddie and Chavo, uncle and nephew. So we've seen similar things, but
yeah, it's weird in terms of Bill. Like I guess in a lot of ways because it ties into the whole bloodline
Vince and Shane. Forgot about that one.
No, yeah, that's Vince and Shane. Gotta love those McMahon family reunions. But it feels like through the whole concept of the bloodline and then just the wrestling history in general, it feels like Owens and Zayn and the situation with the Usos has had the best unanimous build because everything else has either been thrown together or it's had time to be built, but it's not picked up the momentum that it should have. Like we talked about it with Cody, like he kind of got planted in there amidst the whole Sami Zayn craze of it all, and they've done some due diligence to pick up with that because obviously he's asserted himself in Roman's face and did a good promo or whatever, but it's not like I don't feel like there's nothing. Even with Bianca and Oscar, Oscar's just somebody that she's never faced. That's an actual contender who has obviously had a rep to be one of the baddest to come through the company when they allowed her to be. Um, but nothing's really felt um, like that feud that Triple H and Randy Orton had going into that Mania match that ultimately was a dud, not only because it followed uh, Taker and Shawn, the first one, which was going to be an L either way, but also because they couldn't really have no type of match because essentially if Triple H got disqualified, he lost the belt. So the match was already like two duds coming into it. Nothing on this card has that build. The build was the best part of that match. He kicked his whole family on the way to that match. Kicked his whole family. Triple H broke in his house, tried to kill him, yada, yada, yada. And all this stuff kind of feels like just thrown together a last minute with the weeks building up. And they've done their best to kind of build it, but a lot of this just don't have the oomph that it should. So it's gonna be another one of those situations. I feel like them years of us talking about they got way too many when they had way too many pay-per-views and the cards looked like crap, but they had to over-deliver on the matches.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like that. Like that's what it feels like. Like what do you kind of has the best build? Is it the father-son thing where I guess they milked it good enough to where everybody was like, would you please just knock the kid on his ass? But we're going to wait to bring the mom in because nobody's going to let their wife and the mother of the kid who's being an a-hole get away with it. So
I would agree that I think the Mysterios have been the best build. Either that or Brock and Omos, because here's the thing: a build is important in two ways. One, it gets you to buy the pay-per-view, but it also sets the expectations for the match. The better the build,
yeah,
the bigger the match needs to play out. The better the build, the more likely are you to pay off the pay-per-view. Now, we're at a point in combat sports where the name brand, not so much the talent, establishes the baseline of where the show is. So you can only add so much in certain degrees. So when I see this, and I see Ray and Dominic, I know it's not a huge draw on its own, but I feel like they've done enough where their match has some expectations to it. But Brock and Omos' match has zero expectations to it. And it would almost be a better thing for everyone if it was terrible. Sloppy, falling over each other. Brock turns into a strawberry way too soon. Almost misses the finishing big boot and ends up crotching himself for real and tears his groin. Brock ends up, trying to suplex Omos and falls over MVP, and they stumble out of the ring, and Brock just kind of goes home and almost wins by count. Like, that would be hilarious and perfect because that's how bad the build's been for this match. And I feel like you have to have a match that matches the energy of the build. And I feel like this is it. I don't know why you put Brock against Omos because I don't know why you think Omos can be a star. I know MVP is really like MVP. I think said something pretty incendiary where he's like, Omos is the best big man in wrestling history. I think he said that. I might be wrong, or he might be the best big man in WWE right now. He said something like that. He really overcooked Omos's grits. And I don't know if he intended. Like, here's the thing: when you try to book something that profoundly, like when you try to put something over that profoundly, there comes an air of expectation that it's going to fail. Edge and Randy Orton's match in 2020 was a terrible match. It wasn't, but it was called the greatest match ever, and it not even got close to that. When you say it's the greatest book, the greatest movie, the best song, the greatest, I don't know, ever, there are expectations that must be delivered upon. And if they can't do that, then all the hype in the world doesn't help. It hurts. It makes you seem completely inept, and it basically hurts the ability to hype up the next thing. You got to be honest with your hype. And MVP hyping up almost as much as he did, yeah, it's not helping anyone. Let me see if I can find what he actually said. It says, almost is the greatest ever. All right, so I wasn't wrong. My giant almost is the greatest giant ever to grace the WWE ring. Those were
Yeah,
words that MVP said.
and coming off of the fact that you had to remember that Kali is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's one of them situations where you have to oversell the product because it got rushed to shelves.
I don't know if you remember this. Were you watching WWE around the time of WrestleMania 19 when they were in Seattle? Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar in the main event?
Yeah,
So there was a match that was on the card. It was going to be Giant Albert or A-Train or whatever his name was, and the Big Show versus The Undertaker and, what was his name, Nathan Jones? No. What the hell is his name? He was in World Wrestling All-Stars. He was the Colossus of Buggeroo. I'm going to just Google Nathan Jones because I think that might be it. Yeah, Nathan Jones. So Nathan Jones is a 6'11" bodybuilder who spent time in prison for armed robbery and got into pro wrestling in Australia and got picked up by the World Wrestling All-Stars, which was kind of a progenitor to the NWA TNA of 2022. And apparently people liked him in the WWE and signed him. And they put him in a tag team match at WrestleMania with The Undertaker against Prince Albert and Big Show. But they're like, he sucks. We can't do this match anymore. So it became a handicap match. And I feel like watching Omos is like watching Nathan Jones all over again. There's a lot of hype and desire to put him into the scene, but no real reason to. And I don't know why they're doing it. So,
yeah, it kind of feels like, or oddly enough, it kind of feels like not at all too dissimilar from what they tried to do with guys like a Kali, like a, and about to remember Vladimir Kozlov.
mm-hmm.
He was a thing. Mason Ryan was a thing. Um, yeah, they've had a lot of guys that be things that just didn't necessarily work at all. And I get almost is he's kind of like Strowman. So obviously he's black, Nigerian, and then just he's an attraction, and Brock is an attraction all of his own. But and even to go back and remember what I said, they could do situations like they did with Shawn and Angle. And I don't necessarily remember if that match had any build or they kind of just did it as like a thing. I think they had something, if I'm not mistaken, something coming out of that year's Rumble where either I don't know who eliminated who, but they had a little thing coming out of the Rumble. So that was
If
a
I
little
remember, Sean super kicks Angle out of the Rumble. Angle comes back and eliminates
pulls
Sean
him.
and then
Yeah,
beats the shit out of him.
yeah,
But then Angle goes on this 8-week tirade on SmackDown, going out of his way to decimate everything he can about Sean's legacy, including but not limited to Marty Jannetty and Sensational Sherry. It is one of the better builds in WrestleMania history.
gotcha. Because I was like, we always talk about how that was like a super match that kind of just got put together. But I'm glad because I vaguely remember that being a thing. So yeah, that is one of the better builds, and also because like you said, that is one of them rare situations where how do these two guys never meet, and then obviously they met and we got the results of it. But um, yeah, this is like we talked about it when this first got brought up. This is a stunt match. This is one of them things where it's like it's a test to pop the crowd because if Brock gets almost as big ass up for that F5, And getting them up on the shoulder is one thing. Executing it fully the way it actually looks clean is another thing. So I feel like also this gonna be a stunt match, like you said. Now that you done kind of laid that out, it almost comes off. It might come off better if it is as sloppy as you said, but there's also, because there's no expectation, pleasantly surprise you, like that last match that Brock had with Goldberg, where it was just like, this is a good way to spam finishers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we've seen the other version of that, and it is cringe would have been an improvement. So, um, like you said, I think also the Mysterios, and then the whole thing with Zayn and Owens, because that not only ties into their friendship, but also within the whole bloodline thing, which they both been dealing with in and out for months. So, but everything else, like I said, even with Oscar and Bianca, they kind of just been coming out, and they've let each other, I guess, attack each other back and forth, but they kind of just been coming out iffing at each other and pointing at the WrestleMania sign, which is the laziest form of building any of these matches, which they constantly do. So, let's see.
So let's talk real briefly about two little topics. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them. The NWA is going on tour with the Smashing Pumpkins in 2023. Marcus, is this a good idea for the NWA?
No, it's not. But to be fair, it'll be consistent with the litany of other decisions they've made in the last however many years. So, I mean, if Tyrus is still their champion, I feel like saying it can't get worse is about on point.
I do believe they're building up to putting the belt on EC3. That seems to be the direction they're going.
Jesus.
3 years ago, that would have been a great idea. 4 years ago, but still. And then lastly, Nigel McGuinness is looking to get back into wrestling. He's open to offers. I've been putting feelers out there. The former Ring of Honor World Champion tried in 2011, but he had a successful run in non-wrestling roles with Ring of Honor later, WWE. In an interview with the two-man power trip of wrestling, yeah, I said that right. McGuinness was asked whether he was done with wrestling. He responded by stating that he is open to offers and he has put some feelers out there. I'm certain open to offers. I think they meant certainly, and possibilities. And obviously, I've been putting out feelers to see if there's any interest. There's been various different bites out there. Without going into the details, nothing yet, but hopefully, professional wrestling is an industry that I've devoted the last portion of my life to. When I went my separate ways with WWE, I sat down with a piece of paper and I wrote down wrestlers as one of those things I'd be silly to walk away from. An industry that has treated so well and given me so many blessings over the last 10 to 20 years. So certainly open to offers, but nothing definitive right now. It's very exciting, interesting world in the professional wrestling at the moment. McGuinness was also asked whether he's retired from the ring. He noted that everyone asks him that, and he can't give a definitive answer. McGuinness stated that he wouldn't rule it out, but he feels his strengths are in other aspects of the business. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it, he says. Everybody asked me that as soon as I went my separate ways from WWE as well. I can't give a definitive answer to that. I certainly feel my strengths at this point in my life are in other aspects of the industry, but I wouldn't rule it out 100% either. There's always that part of you that wants to have that final moment, but sometimes cooler and smarter heads have to prevail. So it's a cliche to say never. You see a lot of people like Edge, Lita, Trish, of course. A lot of people come back and have really, really good match and have some really positive influences on the industry. And in a way are able to help the next generation. And I think that's fantastic. So only time will tell what really happens. Marcus, you want to see the Nigel back in the wrestling ring, or do you want to see him stick with the commentary?
I mean, look, I think he can work. I don't know what it's gonna look like as a performer. I have to see it. If he's confident, he can still go in there and do solid, adequate work. Look, we've seen that on a litany of variations from Kaz, Edge, Brian. I want to come off like a douche, but I almost don't want to throw Lita in there. Um, we've seen different variations of. I think the best thing about this scenario is he's practically an all-tool player in terms of, if he can go in the ring, that's one thing. He can also do commentary. That's great. Because we always talk about how important that is and pivotal key that is to a lot of companies and certainly matches. But he can also be a booker or somebody that can just help channel in a lot of different ways. He got so much wisdom. He kind of reminds me of a Regal in that way. You know, you could be invaluable to like an Impact roster or something like that, or in it, like MLW or something like that. He has options. I was just curious to whether or not he kind of wanted to get back in the ring, and obviously he kind of gave an extensive answer on that. That was still somehow vague. Um, but you never know. I think it's one of those things where he's kind of like go either way if the move strikes me. But it's good to know that he does still want to be involved in the business because I think he's somebody that can benefit a lot of these talents that we are not necessarily the highest on. You know,
I think him as a manager might be very interesting.
that's another thing too. Who are some names you might want to see that you think could uh, go with his personality?
I think it depends where he ends up. Right off the top of my head, if we're talking Impact, I think Macklin needs him, especially since Impact seems to be going in that direction.
Yeah,
They seem to be wanting to put the belt on Macklin now that Josh Alexander's been injured. And that's another thing we didn't talk about, which I guess we can briefly talk about. They're doing the Kushida Macklin match for the Impact World title now that Alexander's out for a definitive amount of time due to a torn bicep. And they need all the help they can get to get Macklin over because I think Macklin is a lesser impressive version than Gunner.
damn. Let's talk
Yeah.
about and you ain't heard in a while. That's
Not as a person, mind you. I think Macklin might be a pretty decent guy.
yeah.
But as a performer, I was much higher on Gunner when he was doing his feud with Nick Aldis in 2014 than I was on Macklin in anything he's been doing in Impact. I just don't get the hype around Macklin. They're really trying to drive him home. He's not a bad hand by any means, but he's not a world champion. That's confusing to me. And I'm wondering why they're going in the route they're going with. When you have guys like Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, newly signed to fresh contracts. For Shelley, this is his first full time wrestling contract in 6 years. He said, so like he's definitively with the promotion. Like there's no doubting that. So I'm curious as to why this is the route they're going. And I'm kind of wondering why somebody like Moose isn't being considered, or even a Swan.
I wonder, and to your point, the whole Swan thing, because we had talked about it before the pay per view happened, why he was getting why they did that match and Swan ended up getting the shot instead of Macklin, ironically enough. And it hadn't dawned on me that Swan basically got booted all the way back down the card after that whole Mega thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been 2 years since he had a shot. So I appreciate the fact that they kind of long termed it and was like, no, like this has kind of been a long time coming because he literally kind of got screwed over in that whole situation. I mean, obviously he lost straight up and down, but there was just a bit of unfairness that kind of weighed over that whole thing. Um, so it was good to see him try to obviously actually win a match and not come out and demand something and get it as we've seen in other places. But so bringing that back full circle, but because he's had his shot, I mean, look, you got Gresham, you got Mike Bailey, you got you could throw King's name in the ring in the hat if you want to fill out some spots. Um, but I think with Macklin, they've done so much to build on the fact that he's been on a streak, winning, and it has been his whole narrative. Like, y'all gonna keep making me jump through these damn hoops, and I'm telling y'all what I want. I'm getting the wins to get what I want, and y'all keep letting people leapfrog over me. So I can appreciate the fact that they're actually gonna go ahead and put him in that position without actually just handing it off to him, as we've seen in the past that can happen. And Kushida is certainly no scrub, and the fact that we've seen Kushida um, and obviously other names from New Japan, it's been really good. So I think that's gonna be a really good test for him specifically. Um, but yeah, there's a bit of an air missing, and maybe that's the point because it is tag him, bag him, mayhem for all. His character really isn't supposed to be ingratiated into people liking him in a way. But to your point, there is a certain certain ad that a champion needs that somebody like Moose kind of grew into as he not only honed his character but honed his body along with it. I think somebody like Alexander, specifically coming out of that tag team, kind of not only in his fearlessness as a fighting champion, they kind of grew on you. I don't know if Macklin is somebody that's gonna grow on you as a champion.
No, and part of me hopes they just put the belt on Kushida. Like, he's not even an Impact talent. He can't cut promos. But, man, at least you would have Kushida and the Guns in a prominent spot with the Time Splitters trio. And that's better than Macklin.
That tells you all you need to know when Chad's like, can't cut a promo worth a damn, but he's still bad.
Right? And, like, I don't...
It is about talkers.
There's so many better options. Like, Gresham, right there, Ring of Honor World Champion. And it's not like they're doing anything with him that can't be adjusted to fit, right? Like, even if they have a feud with him and Speedball that's going to go to Slammiversary, it's not something that can't be added to the world title now. You don't need to have Speedball and Gresham go right into a world title match. You can build to it. You know, like play around with it, develop it a bit. Or if you want to move away from Speedball, you can. Because there's a lot of guys that Gresham could work with, especially because he's like 5'2", and I'm not being funny by saying that.
No.
Like, you can book him against Moose in a great size versus technique match. So, like, there's so many options there. Or, like, Swan, like, that would be a great match.
And maybe that we're talking about it, maybe that's the plan. Because, like I said, we've seen this streak that Macklin's been on. Maybe he gets it. He somehow knocks off Kushida. And then he does this thing of, like, I'm not fighting anybody that hasn't gone through the amount of crap and trials that I had to go through. So while you might be a credible opponent, Gresham, you got to go through the Kushidas, the Mike Baileys, the Kenny King, who I would imagine somebody's just going to be a natural irritant anyway. You got to go through the Mooses, and you got to prove to me with wins that you're worthy of fighting somebody who actually had to do that stuff. That could be a place that they're going. I think maybe Gresham does have next, but I guess, because we've seen such wacky world title bills and reigns and times prior. I can actually appreciate that they're sticking to something that they started. But maybe I think it is a thing that Gresham got next, because to me he's the guy second behind Alexander. Did they have a match already, by the way?
Who?
Him and Gresham, Alexander and Gresham. They did, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
During their first during Gresham's first stint, I think.
Yeah. So to me, he's the second behind that. But I do think, to your point, putting him up against somebody before he gets to a Macklin who could possibly be champion, if that's the direction that they're going, Moose is gonna immediately go like, I'm not gonna let this ant step in front of it, because that's Moose's natural thing. So that'll be a great way to do that. And like you said, the great thing is you can do both the Guns as contenders. You can do also, like you said, Kushida again, Bailey, Swan, throw King in there as an irritant, and maybe still have some names in there to do with the X division as well. So they got options, but it's gonna be interesting to see where they go from here. But that's Alexander was on a very unique and successful run, and it sucks, but I am glad that he did get to redeem the situation, because until I watched Sacrifice, a No Surrender, I had no idea that he had the shortest reign in the company and the longest reign in the company.
That is interesting.
Which is a weird stat to have, but it kind of tells you like the story that they told. So, yeah, that's it's gonna be interesting what they do. But that's a blow. That's definitely a blow.
So with all that being said, let's wrap the show up here. We'll be back next Monday, I think, more than likely. Not only with another Wrestling Underground, but also with a brand new Making Marcus Suffer, Making an Impact. I've already watched the next two episodes, 5 and 6. I'm going to watch them again and get some screenshots so that we can properly enjoy the trauma that early NWA TNA is. That being said, I think the 5 and 6 that we're about to watch might be the best we've seen so far, match quality wise, from top to bottom. Just an opinion. Segment wise, got to rewatch it because this is just one of those types of shows. So you can find us on Twitter at Real Nerd Corp. No, it's just at Nerd Corp. NERDCRP. We're on the website at realnerdcorp.com. REALNERDCRP.com. Marcus, you can be found on Twitter at ParadoxKid. ParadoxKid. You can also find him on his other podcast, The True Penny Show, TruePennyShow. You can find me on Twitter at Chad Nerdcorp, CHEDNERDCRP, and on the Instagram at Chad's Photo at CHEDSPHOTOHUT. Once again, we're back next Monday, probably 10 o'clock, give or take, at twitch.tv/Wrestling Underground. I think that's what it is. The Wrestling Underground? Wrestling Underground. And all our shows get ported to YouTube, which you can find on the website at realnerdcorp.com. Marcus, any final thoughts?
Oh, that's about it. It's gonna be a hell of a weekend because they also got the what that is NXT show on Saturday as well. So that's
Don
gonna be
Brickerbracker takes on Cat Mello Haynes Underwear.
hilarious.
That's Friday, right?
Yeah, that's Friday. Stand and deliver.
Don't stand so close to me.
So I think it's Saturday actually.
Really? They're doing a doubleheader?
Let me see. Stand and deliver. Is it earlier that day? NXT. Stand deliver. Sean talking about some give me what I want.
Calm down there, Blutista.
Give me what I want. I want a hit movie. Give me what I want. April 1st. Yeah, Saturday. They're doing a double.
Well, that's the WWE for you. All right. So with all that said, I think we're done.
Yep.
Be sure to tune in next Monday, folks, for another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. For Marcus Green, I'm Chad Porto. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. Remember, as always, to watch more wrestling. And Marcus, take us home.
Good night, me.